Hey everybody, Larry Vincent here, lead pastor at the Bridge HC. So glad that you could join us online as we wrap up our series called Reclaim. Now, every home football game at the University of Notre Dame produces more than a ton of unused food. That is about 2,300 pounds of food that gets thrown away or not used, I should say, at every home game for the University of Notre Dame. Just imagine cooking something for people to enjoy that never gets looked at, that never gets touched or even consumed. Now, I don't know about you, but that would upset me. Because as you know, food that is made but never enjoyed has one final destination. It's a dumpster. It's where it has to go, right? They can't just keep unused food in their back storage containers, right? It just is not how it happens. It needs to get thrown away. And that is a lot of food to waste. Over the course of an entire season, that's over 8 tons of discarded food that should have been enjoyed. But here's the thing that makes Notre Dame so different. Instead of letting the food go to waste, Notre Dame decided to repurpose the food by donating the 8 tons of it to a local food bank in order to help those in need. You know, when something doesn't get used for its original purpose, it doesn't mean it's useless. There is still hope that it can still be used and enjoyed. I mean, look at white elephant gifts, right? White elephant gifts are fun because you get to repurpose things that you wouldn't naturally or normally keep into something that people will enjoy for at least another day, right? Over the last 3 weeks, we have talked about the greatest gift that we have ever received. Now, we define that gift as a perfect and exciting world where we got to live literally in the full presence of God. We explained how we broke the gift by wanting more than what was given to us. And then we told the story of how we lost the gift and the painful consequences that honestly came as a result. I mean, literal, physical, painful consequences. You know, God gave us a beautiful and perfect world to enjoy. And we not only took it for granted, but folks, we ignored it. And now this world that was created for us to enjoy feels as if it is headed for the dumpster. I think every year, since about 2020, we have been calling it the year of the dumpster fire, and it's true. Because I don't know about you, but the world seems to be a very dark place today. It seems as dark as ever, if not more. We are still feeling the impact of a broken and lost gift that we broke and lost thousands of years ago. I mean, think about it. The world today is painful, it's harsh, it's dark. People suffer and die by the millions. I mean, it almost feels at times that God is not here. I hear this told to me by countless number of people who do not know Jesus Christ as their Lord, or who do not think that Christianity is a positive influence on the world, because this world feels that God is not here, that he is not speaking to us, or as some would come to believe, he does not exist. So this kind of world, as we kind of look around and we see what's going on, it leaves us with this lingering question of, where is God? Does he no longer care about you and me? I mean, did he ever? You see, I believe, like so many, that God has never left us. I believe, like so many, that God has never stopped caring. I believe, like so many, that God never will stop caring. Yeah, it's true that the gift of the world that God has given us is in absolutely terrible shape. It is a dumpster fire. But like so many great gifts that we are given, so many great gifts that have been broken, so many great gifts that have been lost, God has found a way to fix our broken world and to repurpose for our benefit. And now we have an opportunity to reclaim the gift that God made for us at the beginning of the world. More importantly, we have an opportunity to restore our relationship with God. That leads us to tonight as we wrap up our Reclaim series. Tonight we're talking about how following the light of the world, Jesus Christ, whose birth we are celebrating this week, the week of this recording, it's Christmas week, and we're talking about how by following the light of the world, Jesus Christ, how that can help us to reclaim God's gift and lead us back into a relationship with Him. Now we're going to do this two ways. This is a two-section conversation. Our first section will be about how God has always been ready to help us reclaim our gift. And then we'll finish up in our second section about how all of us can follow the light back to God. Now, I want to do what I normally do. Let's dive right into our first section that we're calling Eternally Lit. And I want to start by reading from our main text. We're going to be in John chapter 1. That is the fourth book in the New Testament. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's the very first chapter. And it's the first 5 verses is where we're going to start. Here's what John writes at the very beginning of his gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Here's what I learned from this. God's light has always been with us. He brought it into the garden. It was there with the full presence of God, right? In the garden. He brought it into the fallen world well after Adam and Eve sinned and they got kicked out of the garden. He still kept His light in the fallen world. And He kept it visible throughout the history of the world. Last week, I encouraged you to read the entirety of the Old Testament anew and to read it from the perspective of how God has been trying to get us back to the garden. If you've actually done that, and if not, please, I encourage you, at least read the entirety of the Old Testament, because you will see story after story of God's light being visibly seen throughout the history of the world. Because God's light has always been with us. And the reason why it's always been with us is because it's always existed within God Himself. The light that John talks about in chapter 1 is the light that exists within the nature of God. And since God has never left us, nor has He ever abandoned us, as the scripture tells us, His light has never left us. God knew that the sin of Adam and Eve could snuff out His light. Could never snuff out His light. Nor could it snuff out the hope that came as a result. Nothing could take that away. There has always been hope. And even though our relationship with God was broken and lost, and we have destroyed this world that He has given us as a gift, God knew, even back in the day of Adam and Eve, that through His light, He would bring us back. That's why John starts his first chapter of his gospel with a throwback to Genesis. It's the same language. John 1, Genesis 1. In the beginning was God, and the beginning was the Word. It's the same language because John wanted us to make that connection. That just as He promised back in Genesis chapter 3, that the descendant of Eve would destroy the serpent and his hold on mankind, that light would come through Jesus Christ today. God's light still gives life today. In John chapter 1, Jesus is referred to as the Word. And we are told that this Word, who was with God from the beginning, who was God, we are told that he, Jesus, was to be a conduit of creation, meaning that God created the world through the Word. God created through Jesus. And the Word gave life to everything. Jesus gave life to everything, creating a light within all of creation. Now, theologically speaking, it's important for us to tell you that life and light are one and the same when it came to creation. You can't interchange the two. They have to be together. They're one and the same. Because when it comes to creation, they not only do they have life, but they have the light of God within them, both in a physical sense and within a spiritual one. And even though our world seems darker, when Jesus came into the world, he brought his light with him. A light that changes us and brings us back to God. Now, John starts his gospel off this way for the same reason why we encourage people to embrace Jesus in the first place. Because the light that Jesus brought, the light that John talks about in chapter 1, is meant to give hope to a hopeless situation. In between the Old Testament and the New, you have about 500 years that we call the intertestament period. Okay, that is the amount of time that people believe that no gospels were written, no scripture was written, no prophecies were given, that God was pretty much silent. 500 years. And so by the time that Jesus comes into the world, a lot of people are questioning these same things that we brought up at the beginning of our time together. That where is God? Has he stopped caring about us? Has he ever cared about us? Is he even real? John starts his gospel this way to remind people that there is still hope. The hope that darkness, no matter how strong it got, no matter how prevalent it was in our world, it would never completely consume it. So can I tell you, with 100% confidence, not 100% confidence in me, but 100% confidence in God, that the darkness that is trying to invade your life, it will not win. You might be sitting there and thinking, well, what darkness are you talking about, Larry? My life is fine. Well, we've all experienced darkness at one point. And if we haven't, we will. Think about the pain that you've suffered from broken relationships. Or the suffering that you have had to go through because you or a loved one have a life-altering illness. Think about the anxiety that overwhelms you when you are in the midst of losing a job or seeking a new job, or you're just trying to make ends meet so that you can cover your monthly bills. Or maybe you have persistent doubts about your own self-worth, about who you are and what God has called you to do, and whether or not you are good enough or smart enough to do the things that you want to do in life. All these things bring darkness, and all these things threaten to consume you, but they won't. They might get close, and there might be times where you think that it's over and it's done, but it won't, because God has given us a light. And if we embrace that light, the darkness will not win. The light that comes from the Word, that comes from Jesus, shines brightly in the darkness, and it can never go out. I'm telling you, no matter what. There is nothing that we can go through, that we have gone through, or that we will go through. There is nothing that we are doing, or have done, or will do, that could ever snuff out our chance of being in a relationship with God. And when I say this, I mean absolutely nothing. That light is available right now just as much as it was available 2,000 years ago when Jesus was brought into this world the first time. Nothing can take that away from us. This is what I want you to hold on to as we enter into our first set of discussion questions. If you're new with us, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. Here's what we're about to do. You're about to see some questions pop up on the screen. You're going to hit pause when those questions come up. And if you're with a group, you're going to take the time to discuss either one or all three of those questions within about 10 to 15 minutes. Take as much time really as you want, but recommended 10 to 15 minutes. And if those questions don't hit you in a certain way that that fosters a lot of discussion, talk about anything that came out of this time that we just spent together. Okay, things that hit you, the things that confuse you, things that you don't agree with, those kind of things. But take about 10 to 15 minutes to do that. And if you're by yourself, that's okay. Don't just skip through this and move on to the second section. Take the time to personally reflect, to write down your thoughts on these questions or on anything that you've heard thus far. And when you're done, go ahead and come back and push play, and we will start our second and final section of discussion. Hey guys, welcome back. I really hope you had a great time of discussion or reflection. And I want to continue into our final section today that we're calling Lighting the Way. And I want to do that by continuing our text found in John chapter 1. We read verses 1 through 5. Now we're going to read verses 9 through 14. Okay? Here's what John writes as he continues his gospel. He says, "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world." This is Jesus, was in the world. "And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. And the Word became flesh." This is how we know it's Jesus. "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Now, I'm hoping that when you were in your last part of your discussion that you started questioning what exactly is the light of God. What do we mean by that? One of the problems that I have with Christianity today is that we use all of these cliches and we have no idea what they actually mean. We say these things as if it's true, but we really don't know what it is that we're saying. So when we say that Jesus is the light of the world, what do we even mean? What does it mean to be God's light? Well, as I see it, the light of God is the same thing as his love. That within his very nature, God is love. That's what we learn about in John's other letter to the church, specifically the first one of his letters to the church called 1 John. And in there, he tells us that God is love. Within the very nature of God, all that God is love. Well, that love and that light, those are the same terms. So the light of God is also the love of God. And so Jesus, as the light of the world, is the example of God's love to us as his creation. And so that light, that love, what John tells us in this section of scripture that we just read, that light is for all of the world. And the cool thing about this is that God did not have to share his light with us. It's not as if we deserved it or owed it, because we failed, and we still fail God. Look at the condition of this world and tell me that we have done an exemplary job of the gift that God has given us. No, we haven't. Our relationship with creation sucks. Our relationship with one another sucks. And even our relationship with ourselves sucks. So we don't deserve to have this gracious response from God. We don't deserve to have his light. We don't deserve to have his love. But yet, God wanted us to have it. He gave it to us anyway. I mean, how awesome is that? But not only did God decide to share it, he decided to hand deliver it. Do you realize God could have just snapped a finger or said a word or pushed a button, for crying out loud? And the light of God could have encompassed the entire world. But that's not how God rolls. That's not who God is. No, instead, God decided to wrap himself in human flesh and live in our broken and dark world. And at every step of the way, he proved that the light that he gives can break through the darkest of moments. Which means that those things that we talked about earlier, those painful moments that we experience as people today, there is nothing so dark where we cannot see the light of God. Not even death. But here's the thing. Only those who embrace God's light, who embrace the love of God within themselves, can be reborn by the light. As he did in Genesis, God is sharing his light with the entire world. That's why we read just a few chapters later in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that he gave his light, that whoever so believes in him shall not die, but have everlasting life. God has shared his light with the entire world, and those who embrace that light, those who come to Jesus, who put their faith into Jesus, will be recreated by the light. But not in a physical way, in a spiritual way. This is why Jesus became human. Not just to live our lives separate of us, but to hand deliver his love, to share the light of the world, so that you and me, 2,000 years later and beyond, could have hope. Jesus became human for the sole purpose of telling people about the light that he gives that brings forth new life. Which means that those experiencing hopelessness can be filled with God's love if we just embrace the light that comes from Jesus. So what needs to be done? How do we respond to all of this? I see it a few ways. Number one, we have to see Jesus as the light of the world. We have to recognize him as the light of the world. We have to believe that that's who he actually is. That he is the exemplifying nature of God's love in human form. But not only should we see him and recognize him for who he is, but then we also have to receive him as the light of the world. We have to put our faith into him. We have to trust him. We have to ask him to take control and to embrace the light so that we can see the path that it creates out of the darkness and back into the arms of the Father. And once we receive Jesus as the light, our call is to follow Jesus, because he will light a path for us. Hebrews tells us that he is the author and the perfecter of our faith, that he is the trailblazer of our faith, which means that he has set a path for us because he has already walked it, and he lights that path so that we can follow it with ease. And so not only do we recognize him, not only do we receive him, but we follow him. We follow him out of the darkness, back into the arms of the Father. Jesus is the light. He is the path. Jesus is the solution. John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says this, "I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. No one gets out of the darkness unless they walk my path. No one sees the way they should go unless they embrace my light." Jesus is the solution to our dark world. He may not take away our pain or the harshness of our world, but he will give us comfort and peace if we simply ask for it. And I guarantee you, not because of anything that I have done, but because of everything that he has already done, that he will walk alongside your suffering. He will shed your tears with you. God, as Jesus, is here. And yes, he does care. He cares about you. He cares about your children. He cares about your family. He cares about your friends. He cares about everything that you care about. And he always has. So follow Jesus. Recognize him, receive him, and follow him out of the darkness and leave that darkness for good. It's time for our second and last set of discussion questions. They're going to pop up here in a moment. Take about 10 to 15 minutes to either discuss or reflect on either one or all three of these. And when you are done, push play, come on back, and we will wrap things up. Welcome back. This is a favorite sermon of mine, a conversation, I should say, of mine, because it reminds us that, or at least people like me, that tend to focus on the dark moments, that there is still hope and light in this world. I have to believe that, because if I don't, I can't imagine where my life would be. Jesus is the reason that I still have happiness and joy. Jesus is the reason that I even attempt to be a good father and husband. Jesus is the one who gives me hope that there will be a day where I don't have to worry about my emotional health or my mental health or my physical health or any kind of other health, because I will be given a new body and a new place to dwell, and I will be in the full presence of God again. This is what happens when we embrace Jesus. He gives us reasons to keep on keeping on. And that brings me to the one thing that I want you to understand today, the one thing that I want you to hold on to, the one thing I want you to think through, especially if you're watching this around the Christmas season, or any season for that matter. In a world of darkness, follow the light. Find it, yes. Receive it, yes, but follow the light. Because if we can't do that, then we will get lost in the darkness. And I don't want any of us, I don't want you to be consumed by the darkness. I want you to be consumed by God and his light and his love instead. Now, if you're watching this and you're starting to think, okay, well, what do I do? How do I get through this? How do I get to that path? How do I seek out Jesus? How do I receive him? How do I follow him? Reach out to us, please. Our social media sites are great places for you to message us or direct message us, depending on what media platform that you use. You can comment to us on YouTube. You can email me, and we will respond. We will make sure that we spend some time having a conversation and helping you to understand the potential next steps that you might want to take in your journey with God. But maybe you're sitting here and you're wanting just a little bit more. You want to understand just a little bit more. You're not quite ready to reach out, but you want to experience this in a different way. Let me tell you, the best way to experience what we're trying to do here through these conversations is by coming to us live, sitting at a table of about 4 to 5 people who love you, who care about you, who value your opinion, and just sharing your thoughts, asking your questions. People who aren't afraid to share what they feel and what they disagree with. That's why we exist. We exist because we want people of different backgrounds and different lifestyles and different experiences to come together and to focus on Jesus together and to have conversations where, yeah, we might disagree, but we will still respect and value the other. So we encourage you to come every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. for worship, fellowship, and conversation. Now, if you're not comfortable yet with the worship part, or and you want to skip that, that's fine. We actually start the conversations at 7 p.m. so that people who do feel uncomfortable can come in when they do feel comfortable and join us for at least the conversation. We want to be a safe place for you, and we want to help you to explore your faith and your journey with God in a way that is respectful to who you are as a person. Well, maybe you're sitting there and you already have a place that you want to go, and that's fine and that's great, but you want to help us in our mission to help the hurting and the people who need healing. Let me encourage you that we are a non-for-profit, and we do need as much help as we can get financially to continue this ministry. And if you are willing to give a small gift of any kind or a regular gift of any kind, would you please go to donate.thebridgehc.org and fill out an account there, and you can give one time or you can set up an account and give regularly. Any gift that you are able to give, I don't care if it's $1, $5 or more. Any kind of gift that you are willing to give helps us to provide the resources that we need to reach out to those who have been hurt, those who need healing, those who are hopeless, those who need Jesus. So please, thank you in advance for giving. Next week, we are talking about relevance and reverence. We're talking about how the church is versus how the church should be. How we see that as a church, as the Bridge HC. So we hope that you can join us for that. Until then, though, as always, peace, love, and soul.